This episode of Artists Decoded is brought to you by No Wave Academy. As creatives and artists, we have each personally experienced the turbulent road of artistic self-improvement. And as the co-founder of the LA-based artist collective No Wave and No Wave Academy, I can tell you that our objective is to offer an alternative path to a traditional arts education. No Wave Academy courses are taught by some of our favorite artists. They're also our personal heroes and colleagues. Some of these artists you may have heard on this very podcast, while others have been featured in exhibitions at the No Wave Gallery. Such artists include Casey Baugh, Mia Bergeron, Nick Runge, Sean Cheatham, and Kate Zambrano, to name a few. All of our instructors are working professional artists that have been showcased in galleries and museums, both locally and around the world. At No Wave Academy, we work tirelessly towards evolving the way you learn and to expand your artistic passion and craft from the very best in the field. We believe that everyone has a unique artistic spirit. With guidance, experience, and the proper tools, students have the ability to invigorate and elevate their work. You can unlock and unblock your creative inner voice. Join us and walk into the next chapter of your personal artistic evolution. Go to nowaveacademy.com. That's nohwaveacademy.com. Type in AD-10 at checkout for 10% off. Now, on to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to Artists Decoded. This is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to episode 182. Today I spoke with writing and directing duo Gerard and Christopher Renz. We were able to speak about their newest feature film entitled Antebellum, where a successful author played by Janelle Monáe finds herself trapped on a 19th century southern slave plantation and is confronted by the horrifying reality that forces her to face the past, present, and future. They also teamed up with the producers of Get Out and Us for this film. If you're into horror films, you should definitely go check this out. It's available on video on demand, or you can go to their website, antebellum.movie. We also talk about topics such as the meaning of truth, the emotions that were felt on set for Antebellum, leaving behind a legacy, and much, much more. We recently launched our Patreon page, and as you may know, but Artists Decoded is an independently created podcast. If you would love to support Artists Decoded, go to our page at patreon.com/artistdecoded, or you can leave us a review on iTunes. And without further ado, here's my conversation with directing duo Gerard and Christopher Renz. Hope you enjoy it. How are your days going?
It's a surreal time, these days, I think, for everybody, but we're trying to capitalize off of the moment of required solitude to do as much writing as we can, and looking forward to November 3rd. It's pretty much
Aren't we all? We all?
Praying for the right outcome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just really quick, can you both state your name, because the main platform is the audio only podcast, just so we know, for the viewers can know whose voice it is.
Yep, I'm Gerard Bush.
I'm Christopher Renz.
Awesome, thank you so much. And yeah, so Gerard, my friend Jerome Lagarrigue, who I had on the podcast, and he was the one who originally introduced me to Gerard, and I originally emailed you, and then he was telling me about your film. Yeah, and then this is pretty much how it happened, is through Jerome.
Yeah, Jerome is. We met Jerome years ago at this event for Amnesty International in New Orleans, and we were doing a mini documentary for Amnesty International on mass incarceration. And Jerome was one of the featured artists, and we loved his work. We love his energy, his spirit.
He's so talented.
Yeah, we think the world of Jerome. So when he reached out to us about Art Decoded, because it was a recommendation from Jerome, and we knew that it would be something pretty cool, something we'd be interested in. But yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, and it was interesting watching the film the second time and then seeing the little Easter egg, that little panning shot where Jerome's piece was in.
Yeah.
It was cool to catch that. And also just from doing a lot of research on both of you and on the film, just understanding that there is all these little Easter eggs. And I just think about that in terms of, I don't know exactly the percentage it is, but there's so many things that we see on a everyday basis that we don't see. Maybe it's like 5% of the things that you encounter in life, you kind of miss the other 95%. And it's always interesting to like revisit a film and to visually see those things, but then also understanding the end of the film and then retracing the steps back. So I found that to be a pretty cathartic experience.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, for us, it's really interesting that you brought up about not seeing, only really seeing a fraction of what is in the world that we live in. And I think so much of that is informed by perspective. And that's why for us, it was really important. And also it was an interesting line of inquiry for us as artists to look at how you shift perspective and paradigm for the audience, and that perspective, the way that you're looking at something, will totally change based on your knowledge, your immediate knowledge, your knowledge of history. There's some people that watch the film initially and they're so thrown off because they think to themselves, well, if they cared so much about the cinematography and all these other things, but it doesn't seem like they're really paying attention to historical fact and how to, for people that really, for those in the audience that really understand history. And then they find out later at the end of the movie, it all makes sense. So the movie evolves and blooms in a way as you're experiencing it, because even what you thought you were experiencing in the first 20 minutes of the film, when you're at the end, your mind is going back to those first 20 minutes and suddenly looking at it in a completely different way. That's really interesting to us, just perspective, because perspective, it really has so much to do with ultimately the outcome for society and humanity, generally speaking. If you're not aware and you have persuaded yourself into believing one thing, and that's not an empirical truth, it's just that you believe it, and the truth is the truth. So, like, if we talk about the climate, the truth of the situation in terms of what scientists support is that the climate crisis is causing us catastrophic issues on the planet. The planet will survive. It's us that won't survive it. So it's perspective of people that, because the truth, in the words of the great Al Gore, can be incredibly inconvenient.
Yeah. So
it's like, I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather pretend that everything is fine. I'd rather, the inconvenience of having to deal with this truth and having to reconcile it.
Yeah, no, and that's something that I've been thinking about too, is just the idea of objective truths and subjective truths, and also just the idea of truth with an S, truths. Something that we all carry a certain weight to our experiences in life, and we all have, which is actually something that I want to talk to you about, is just both of your, what I find interesting about like a director duo such as yourselves, since we're speaking about both of you, is, just I wanted to talk about like your relationship and building trust. And I know you two have been collaborators for about 12 years now. Is that accurate?
Yep.
And, going from having a successful advertising agency in Miami and then, working with people such as Jay-Z. And I know you do a lot of things with social activism as well.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have all those experiences inform you into creating this film, Antebellum, but also how both of you have your own unique life experiences. And I'm curious, like, how did the making of this film challenge and strengthen your partnership together?
It's a great question. Chris, you want to?
I don't know. I mean, I would say we've been collaborators for 12 years, but we've also been life partners for 12 years. So I think, through all the work we did in the advertising agency and through all the work we've done in social justice and the few music videos that we did that also had social justice themes, we really just we're in a place where we have a very similar vision. Yes, we're brought up differently in different parts of the country. One of us is Black, one of us is white. We have very different life experiences, but we have very similar taste quotient. And I think that's what carries us through all of our projects. And I also think that the fact that we write everything together is very helpful as well, because we're creating these environments and these characters together in our house by ourselves, and working through all of the details so that once we are in pre-production and then in production, we already know exactly what we want. We've worked it through 100 different ways, in the privacy of our own home, fighting through different ideas on characters and settings, and so I think that really informs how we are as directors on set, is that, we do have this life together, and we go through the entire process of creating these concepts and writing these scripts together.
We also, I think, a part of our ultimate sort of idea as soon as we got together, it was in the first 3 days, we were writing a short story about aliens that we were going to adapt to a screenplay to make a movie. And we just thought, okay, well, that's not, I don't think it's realistic for us to pack up all of our stuff and move to Hollywood on a hope and a dream. I think, let's first of all, let's hone our united artistic voice. And I think that it was really important that both of us, which was what the advertising agency was really central in our finding out who we were as artists individually, because we would work on different things. We would both oversee everything at the shop, but we had different things that we worked on. And so it gave us an opportunity to really get a clear reflection of who we were individually before we started to really aggressively go in the direction of it was always just Christopher and I in the writing and the directing of every piece that we did. And so, I don't know, like Antebellum for us was always going to be the tip of the proverbial iceberg, and that we were going to work toward that ultimate goal of telling stories for the long form, for the cinematic experience, for the theatrical experience, which, COVID robbed us of. But at the same time, it gave us, although so many people around the world have thankfully been able to see the film safely in a theater because they can still have nice things. Here we delivered the movie into the living rooms of so many Americans at a time that if the movie was going to really serve its utility beyond entertainment, so much of it has to do with timing. And so the timing felt like this was absolutely the right time.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things to be said about that, just the acceptance that, we're in this specific time period, going through the COVID-19 pandemic, and then not being able to hit theaters in the US. But I know that you guys are able to have showings in other parts of the world as well, like Korea and Asia and in Europe as well. But I think, that's also the challenging thing too. Not just challenging, for both of you, but also just in life in general is the acceptance of things, the hardships. And I don't know, there's something really beautiful about, just listening to you to speak. And then also just thinking of like, I think, with relationships too, there's all these trials and tribulations and, it's either you will want to fight for them or you don't, and right. And I think, but that's the thing that strengthens a partnership too. And I that's something that I find really fascinating just about relationships in general. But going back to your writing process, both your writing process, I found that it was really interesting that Gerard, I believe that you're an early bird. Is that correct? And right. Yep. And then Christopher is more of a night owl. And then I think about that in terms of the writing process and how that almost creates this dialogue and this conversation between you two. And also speaking of, you both are talking about that sort of inward process of being strengthened internally, individually, but then you have this conversational piece that you create on a Word document and not Final Draft from what I've heard.
We've gotten much better. Now we're on Final Draft. And
Yeah. No, I'm just obviously saying that in jest, but yeah, no, I mean, I think, I mean, that wasn't really a question, but I guess the question is like, now that you've written a script, put it out into a film and went through that whole entire process, like how has that informed your process of working together now for future projects?
Well, we already, it's interesting that we already wrote and sold the next thing, which is Rapture, which is a big movie. And Lionsgate, again, is our studio partner on that film. We also wrote a television show. We just, for us, we have a voracious appetite for discovery, for the discovery that lives within us, the stories that are yet to be told. And I think if it's informed our process, having made Antebellum together, maybe it's too soon, too early to say. I think it has only reinforced the titanium connection that Christopher and I have in a trust that we have for each other and our ferocious protection of one another and of the art. Ultimately, we both are in possession of a thing that enables or activates the other person in a way that no one had been able to do before and probably would never be able to do again. So it's kind of a once in a lifetime collision of energy and spirits and personalities. And so I think I oftentimes marvel at just how fortunate or lucky or blessed, depending on what your belief system is, that we were able to find each other and identify that gift in the other person and recognize that, I think sometimes we walk around as human beings in terms of our potential of who we are as people. And I truly believe that we're a physical manifestation of our spiritual selves. That's a different conversation. But I think that we spend so much time
like that.
Wandering around. And the answer more than likely, if not always, is within you. But then sometimes there is a destiny that really is reliant upon another spirit, another person that you've engaged in some sort of agreement that you were, if you're lucky enough to cross paths, that you would activate in such a way. So everything that happened with Antebellum, for me, it just reaffirmed what I already knew intrinsically. And it gives you, I think when you are out making I don't think it should be daring or bold to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, in America at this particular juncture, anyway, it is. And I think that we are in a place now where the country is polarized on so many levels that people that are on polar opposite sides, they're polarized within the side that they're on. It just continues to divide in ways that, well, I'm black, and my particular way of being black is the only way. And if you're not my black, and if you don't think in my black way, and if you don't make art that I deem as acceptable black art, then you're just not my type of black. And I'm using that as an example.
Yeah.
But I think for me, and what I would say to anyone who is making, not everybody gets to make a big studio film and do this thing that we're, but like whatever you may be doing in your art, where you have decided to say something truthful, which I think that's the only way art can really exist. And so when you've said something truthful, I think that what I learned with Christopher by my side, and what we learned together, is that it's not the art that you create. It's not the process of creating the art. It's the process of trusting yourself and trusting your art, trusting your expression, because you are going to be besieged by all sides. There'll be people that will tell you that you're genius and that what you've created is a masterpiece. And there'll be people that tell you that what you've done is an atrocity. And so you have to be really centered within yourself and clear about who you are, your integrity as an artist, which is directly tethered to yourself as a human, as a spirit. And I don't know that I would have had I hope that I would have had the strength to do that on my own. But with Christopher, I mean, I could definitely do it. Like we're basically like, well, we're clear, and we talk about it and we get clear and we keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of that comes, back into that internal process and understanding who you are as a person, having faith in that, being able to confidently tell that story to multiple people. Yeah. And to be honest with that expression. And I think that is the challenge of presenting artwork, especially on a mass scale, such as a feature film, and having it highly publicized. And then, if there's negative reviews or even positive reviews, like how does that play into your psyche? Because also positive affirmations all the time,
it's not good.
It's not a good thing.
It's not good.
It turns into a confirmation bias. It's kind of like if you hang out with the exact same people as you, like I think it's always good to get some outside opinions, even if those can be kind of harsh too. And, but these are things, don't mean to go off on platitudes, but, but I always seem to do that for some reason. But going back to the spirit, and maybe we'll go a bit into the woo of things, but Gerard, I know that in an interview you were talking about this ancestral calling that you felt, and how this was manifested essentially from the dream that you had directly or close in proximity to when you both moved to Los Angeles, but then also when your father passed away. And I believe you said, I believe you said your boxer passed
Cooper,
away as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was with a brain tumor. Yeah.
Man. I remember that specifically because I've had a boxer before, and they're wonderful.
They're heartbreakers.
They are. They totally are. They totally are. But But I guess my question is that sort of like ancestral calling. Like, do you two consider yourself spiritual people?
I consider myself a spirit, period. And I think, look, so much of what we experience in our lives, what we can taste, see, feel, I've started to understand that it's essentially tantamount to living on the surface of a great lake or a sea. And you start to believe or become indoctrinated by the idea that this is what it is everything that you can experience and feel and see on the surface. But like, I know that just from making art, that it is so much more than that.
Mm.
And when you, I think that there is a collective consciousness. I think that we have no idea of the ideas and inspirations that swim around invisible to the naked eye on a conveyor belt that are delivered to us and that we could pull off and keep or serve as stewards of that inspiration for ourselves, or it's been entrusted to us to do something with. And if we don't, then we lose it. And maybe perhaps another artist will get that inspiration and do it. I don't think I can't explain where inspiration comes from or the art. I think that you can say, okay, Whitney Houston was a phenomenal singer. Amy Winehouse was a phenomenal singer songwriter. Did they go to singing school? No, they didn't. Would they practice their craft often or always? Yes. But did they have a natural gift? I don't care how long I practiced. There is not a handbasket's chance in hell that I would be have the voice of Whitney Houston or any of those.
You sure about that?
Yeah, no, positive. I cannot sing, no matter how hard I try. And by the way, I thought for many years when I was like, no, maybe I can. No, I cannot. But I think that we don't know where our gifts come from. But we know that our gifts are on loan to us. They're not ours to keep. Just like the life that we have is not ours forever. What we have forever is what we leave behind. And what we leave behind is, maybe our children or our art or both, or the way that we made someone feel that then went and did another thing that proved to be really significant or not so significant at all, but it makes a difference and it keeps everything spinning and moving forward. And I think that that's the responsibility that we have as artists, is to take our egos out of the way in as much as we can, because you need the ego to motivate you to say, I can do this thing and that I'm supposed to do this thing, and that what I'm saying in the way that I'm saying it and how I'm saying it is the right and only way to say it. That requires a little bit of ego, but then you have to shed the ego when it's no longer useful to you, when it starts getting in the way of you. Well, I am hurt by this thing, or this has made me angry, or this has made me question. When it's the inspiration, the idea, you get it, you make it, you put it out into the world, and, say what you will, but I'm positive that Christopher and I do everything humanly possible to create an experience for our audience that makes them think and feel and is much more of an experience than something that is passive viewing. So if we achieve that, then we've done our jobs, because everyone is walking around so many people, not everyone, but so many people are walking around numb and not really feeling anything.
Yeah.
And so afraid to feel anything. Even when you look at what's been on offer at theaters over the last, oh my God, 15, 20 years, there was a time in the 70s and 80s that Hollywood was so concerned about desensitizing Americans and the American audience to violence, which the video games are doing that now. The video games have replaced movies in that respect. But now movies, people have this expectation that, they're not going to have to confront anything in big commercial theater pieces that makes them feel that way, that they have to confront the truth of a thing, that it's always abstract enough where there's safe acreage between the audience and the truth. And we've removed that safe distance, and we've put the truth right in front of you. And so you have to confront it.
Yeah. And then I think it's also an interesting experience when there's this mass market of films that are kind of one note to make a generalization. And then to have films that are kind of, speaking of your film, both your films, it's kind of like in the beginning of the film, it just kind of kicks you right in the gut.
Yep.
It's like direct. There's no coding it. I forget what the term is, but it's just right there, visceral, guttural punch to the gut. And it's interesting because it also opens up your perspective and it transports you directly to that emotional place. And I was wondering, speaking of, there's a lot of very horrific, to say the least, scenes in this film. And then can you both speak about the emotions on set while shooting these scenes?
Yeah, well, I think the images in the film are, maybe almost as horrific as the images on CNN. But not really.
Yeah. When Chris, we find it so interesting because to us, it's almost like, we look at the movie through, no pun intended, I'll preface, through a different lens because, when we look at the movie, it's like, it is no more violent than, it's definitely not as violent as any Quentin Tarantino film. It's definitely not as violent as 12 Years a Slave. It's so much of the violence that happens in the film is off camera. We don't show blood and guts and heads exploding and that kind of thing. It's more of the realism of it that I think is what jolts people so much, because it's the fantasy of violence that we can be comfortable with, or it's the hearing of violence, but not having to confront it head on in a way that feels realistic. Our intention anyway was to be responsible for the history of slavery in America in terms of the story that we were telling. And we read this book called When They Were Her Property about white women slave owners in the Deep South. And there was one woman in particular who Jenna Malone studied, who would starve her house slaves. And there was one house slave in particular that she was pretty sure was the offspring of her husband. And she hated her, and she would never give her enough food. And she would leave delicious apples and candy out, trying to tempt the young enslaved girl. And finally, one day she was so hungry and she couldn't resist it, and she took a piece of candy. And as punishment, the woman of the house, the slave owner, she made this young girl, this beautiful young girl, place her head underneath her rocking chair. And she rocked back and forth over her face, breaking her jaw, disfiguring her to the point that no one wanted to even look at her. And so she was sold away, which was ultimately what motivated the woman to do what she did. But these stories were, they were just a part of the slavery experience for Black people in America. Yeah. And we don't come close to showing that in this film. So the feeling on set before any of this happened, we had lengthy conversations with our cast and with our crew that we are doing mission-based work. And this is about truth telling. And we have to honor the ancestors, and we have to honor the truth. And we have to do everything humanly possible to avoid serving as co-conspirators in the erasure of our own history. And so with that knowledge and that mission and that promise, I think all of us were able to engage in the work honestly. And we created a safe environment where these performances could happen.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was wondering too, just about both your entry points into social activism, and I know that it was spurred by the death of Trayvon Martin in 2012. But I was just curious, like, what sorts of conversations do you think are the most important to enact social change, and then how do you feel that Antebellum contribute to that consciousness movement?
Well, we actually became obsessed with voter suppression. Like, voter suppression was a major issue for us prior to Trayvon's being murdered by George Zimmerman. But I think that Antebellum, what we're trying to say to people, and what we hope that at least some portion of the audience walks away from, is that racism and white supremacy is not going anywhere. It is a part of the actual founding of the United States of America. I heard someone asking a question of Mayor Ledbetter in Chicago in reference to the Supreme Court and Judge Amy Barrett, saying that she was an originalist, a constitutional originalist, and asked Mayor Ledbetter if she agreed. And she said, "How could I be an originalist? I wasn't even considered human in terms of, as far as the Constitution was concerned. I don't think the Constitution was meant to be this static document. It's supposed to be this evolving, breathing, living thing." And so I say that to say this: until we can dismantle the scaffolding that supports this foundation of white supremacy in America, we are going to see the steady decline and irreparable or irreversible damage to the democracy. And I dare say that Antebellum was seeded to me not as an SOS from an ancestor from the past, but an SOS from an ancestor of the future. And I think that we better get with the program quickly and stop arguing about the things that trigger us, because pretty soon the entire world that we call America is, if we're not careful, it will turn into an open air shooting gallery. So I would prefer, and Christopher would prefer, that you get this medicine of this art and have the conversation about the art and about politics and about America and where it's going and what we need to do to stop it within the safety of your own home, than for you to continue to lie to yourself about white supremacy in America and that we are not careening dangerously toward a cliff of no return.
Yeah, and I think what you just said also reminds me of the beginning of the film, that William Faulkner quote: "The past is not even dead. It's not even past."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just such an appropriate way to begin the film. And I'm curious too about, taking this time, and, the film has been out for a while now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, since you've had time to since you filmed it and edited it and, been able to process like all those feelings and emotions, like what have you both been thinking about the past couple months?
I mean, we didn't know how, like, what the at home experience was gonna be like, but we remained number one on the charts for 3 weeks, and now we're like top 4, top 3 still, and there's still all this conversation around the movie, and so we feel like we've birthed it, that it's out in the world and those conversations are happening and they'll continue to happen. And we wanted it to serve as a companion piece in many ways to this election. Mm. And so, that part of it is done. But our work as filmmakers, as writers, and our deep concern about and around a whole host of issues, and that includes the climate crisis. That includes the weaponization of religion in order to brainwash and support bigotry and discrimination and an attack on our climate. Obviously, we're interested in tackling issues of race, but there are more than enough monsters for us to mine within American and just Western society, generally speaking, past, present, and even the future, than for us to have to, make up octopuses flying out of the sky.
Yeah. Seriously. Thank you both so much for taking this time to just, share your truths and your story. And, I really appreciate you both for coming on and giving us your insights.
Well, it's been our pleasure. I feel like I'm talking to my therapist.
Yeah. I have a tendency to do that to people. I don't know what it is. It's the buttery smooth voice.
Yeah, that voice is something like you're just like, I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna tell him exactly what I think.
No, I seriously, like, all jokes aside, I really appreciate you both for coming on and sharing your thoughts, and these messages, they need to be heard, and what better form to do that than art, and especially on a mass scale such as your film, so
oh, thank you. We appreciate that sincerely.
Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Creative producer is Noah Wainwright. Research is by Trevor Joyce. Editing and YouTube support is by Tyler Scully. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you next time.